Story RH, the podcast that makes a long story short.
Welcome to all.
History is made of stories.
In this episode, we'll be talking about the importance of consistency within HR departments.
Companies sometimes send contradictory signals to their employees. The meaning, values, and mindset they're trying to promote through company projects, calls to leadership, and big events are undermined by repeated inconsistencies.
The urgent situations that can lead to petty concessions and pandering to immediate interests sometimes create a disconnect between the meaning a company is trying to communicate and the impression employees get from their experiences. It is absolutely imperative to be consistent, and HR is no different. So, consistent HR practices. What's the story?
Consistency is important for cultivating trust. Each little contradiction erodes employee trust, and this can become absolutely devastating when they're perceived as dishonest or ill-intentioned.
Lack of consistency plays a major role in workplace dissatisfaction. To boost employee engagement, you have to make consistency a priority.
In the 2000s, consistency and coherency were already watchwords. Strategic alignment is coherency between the HR policy implemented and the company's strategy.
You have to ensure that the direction chosen by management transfers to HR policies in a coherent way. In other words, a strategy is only effective when paired with a suitable HR policy.
And, when it comes to HR, it all blends together. All HR practices, even those seen or labeled as separate issues, impact one another and are based on a few key interdisciplinary concepts. The overall effectiveness of HR policies depends on the alignment of HR practices with the company's goals, but also on the coherency of these practices with respect to one another.
Back in 1986, in Configurations of Strategy and Structure, Danny Miller demonstrated that internal coherency of HR practices plays a major role in achieving effectiveness. And yet, things are far from perfect in this respect at many companies.
The first obstacle is the way companies are partitioned. While specialization has improved efficiency and productivity in some areas, it has also thrown up walls that hinder cooperation.
HR hasn't been spared either, particularly in decentralized organizations. It sometimes feels like the expert who handles the concept of competency when hiring doesn't use the same dictionary as the person in charge of workforce planning.
This challenge is exacerbated by a second shift. Though necessary, the rollout of IT systems has artificially separated HR activities into separate classifications. These classifications were established first according to ways of working, which were central to the IT systems, process analysis, specifications, etc. But they also reflect the pre-established organization of the software chosen.
To ensure internal coherency and consistency, HR teams need to make improvements in two areas.
First, their ability to take a step back from an overly technical view of the job to get a more holistic view, the full picture. It's important to recognize that most of the challenges HR managers face require a comprehensive approach.
For example, would it be correct to assume that engagement depends solely on HR's management of the balance between contribution and recognition or reward?
The relevance of an engaged policy on a particular topic can be undermined when another HR topic is handled in a totally different way. The rift that can exist between HR and employees can also be due to the fact that different programs are developed and managed separately from one another, producing contradictory effects.
The second area for improvement is the ability to resist the urge to fold under the pressure of urgent situation.
Speed and haste are not the same thing. Haste often leads us to make short-term decisions incompatible with the overall goals laid out by the strategy with which HR must be aligned.
However, this fact calls into question the idea that the head of human resources has in-house customers to serve, and the idea that the customer is always right. Of course, placing people at the center of HR concerns is important, but it must not lead to clientelism to the detriment of long-term vision and overall goals.
Managing crisis situations with nothing but actions and reactions to guide us, with no values or principles to frame them, is one of the best ways to undermine coherency and consistency.
To recap, internal consistency is one of the keys to employee engagement. The head of human resources is responsible for ensuring that his or her decisions and HR practices are in line with the company's strategy, of course, but also that they are coherent with respect to one another. This requires professionals to adopt a long-term, comprehensive vision. Is that right?
Exactly right. Way to make a long story short.
Story RH, the podcast that makes a long story short.